so now that we have looked at the muscular system as well as the skeletal system very briefly, we're going to now look in detail to the circulatory system. So the circulatory system has a very important function. Its main job is to transport materials for living things. Materials like what? Things that you need and things that you don't need. Okay, so for example, we know that there are transport systems that are present in both plants and animals because plants and animals have different requirements and different waste materials. Okay, so for example, in plants, there's a transport system, which is basically, for example, that you already know, the water carrying tubes transport water upwards from the roots to the leaves. And in plants, there's also the food carrying tubes that transport fruit from the leaves to other parts of the plant. Likewise, in animals, there will also be a transport system that will transport oxygen, carbon dioxide, digested food, and waste materials from your body organs for removal. Okay, so the human circulatory system basically transports digested food, oxygen, water, and other nutrients. These are the good stuff. These are the good stuff I'm talking about because your body cells require digested food, primarily glucose, oxygen for respiration, to release energy. At the same time, your organs, after respiration, they will release a lot of carbon dioxide. They will release a lot of metabolic waste like urea. So these stuff, you don't want them to accumulate within your organs, which means that they need to be removed from your body. So how do they remove it? So all these organs will then donate these waste materials into the blood, and the blood will carry them to the various organs for removal. So your circulatory system consists of the heart. What else? It consists also of the blood vessels and the blood. So there are three components of your circulatory system. Okay, so the heart. Okay, maybe before we even go to this, in Singapore, do we have a transport system? We have a transport system. So let's use the MRT as an example. In our transport system, we have the MRT train, we have the passengers, and we have the railway tracks. So the railway tracks are like the blood vessels because that is how it allows the blood to flow in a certain direction only, right? The train is like the blood. It's like the heart because the train has an engine that allows the blood to move in a certain direction. And lastly, the passengers are the good things and bad things that are moving in and out of the blood. Okay, so in our transport system, we have all these elements. Likewise, in the human transport system, we also have a train, we have a train track, and we also have passengers. Okay, so the heart, its function is to pump and move the blood. We will not go into the full structure of the heart, but if you're very interested, you can go on to study biology in secondary school. Okay, so basically, the heart will pump blood to and from the lungs. For those who are interested to know, this is what we call the pulmonary system, where blood moves from the heart towards the lungs. Okay, heart to lungs. So this is a pulmonary system. At the same time, we also have blood that moves to other parts of the body other than the lungs. Then what is the equivalent? This is called the systemic system, or we call it the systemic circulation, where this is basically heart to other parts of the body. Where's my wife? Okay. So the heart will pump all the time, and it's an involuntary muscle, means you cannot control the heart. You cannot tell your heart, okay, you're so poor thing, why don't you take a rest? You've never stopped beating since the day I was born. So poor thing. You can take a break now. And even if you tell your heart that, your heart doesn't stop because you can't control the heart. And that's a good thing. Because imagine if you always have to tell your heart, okay, you must beat, you must beat, you must beat. And then suddenly you see satay. Satay! I feel like eating satay. And then at the point that you feel like eating satay, you forget to tell your heart to beat. You'll drop dead thinking of satay. Right? So it's fortunate that we do not control our heartbeat with our brain. Okay? The heart is hollow. To a certain extent, it means that there's a lot of vacant space in the heart, and it allows blood to therefore move through it. Some parts of the heart are thicker. So, in essence, the left side of the heart is thicker than the right side, because the right side only transports blood from the heart to the lungs, and the lungs are very near the heart. So the right side of the heart that pumps blood to the lungs doesn't need to exert so much force to push blood from the heart to the lungs. But the left side of the heart has thicker muscular walls because it has to transport blood to your fingertips, to your toe tips, and some of these are therefore a further distance away from the heart. Hence, the left side of our heart will have thicker muscular walls compared to the right side. Okay, next, what about the blood? The blood, its function is to actually carry out the transport itself. So it carries your passengers. It carries oxygen, it carries digested food, it carries nutrients, it carries water to cells so that the cells can use all these good stuff to release energy during respiration. At the same time, when your cells produce carbon dioxide and other metabolic waste, they will be carried by your blood to different parts of the body. So carbon dioxide, for example, will be carried to the lungs, and then metabolic waste like urea will be carried to your kidneys, and then your kidneys will do the magic of converting your urea to urine. Okay, so blood has all these, is working very hard. It is transporting good stuff, it's also transporting bad stuff. So let's see. I'm going to open up the chat box for constructive learning. I want to see if you can remember anything about red blood cells, because we have learned about red blood cells very early on. So what are characteristics about red blood cells? Do they contain certain special features? Are there special adaptations? These are important because it's actually linked to this topic. So maybe just share one or two things that you remember about red blood cells in the chat box. Yeah, we do need blood, but my question is, what is so special about red blood cells that enable them to perform their function effectively? Very good. Shay says red blood cells don't have a nucleus. So how does that help? They can carry food. Do red blood cells carry food? Food is actually carried by plasma, not by the red blood cells. The red blood cells only carry oxygen. But the question is, why do they only carry oxygen? There's something special in red blood cells that allow them to bind to oxygen. Let's see if anybody can give me that special big word. So other than not having a nucleus, do you remember anything else, like the shape? What's the shape of the red blood cells? They contain something special. It starts with H. No worries. No. Hormones, not quite. That's fine, but it's a good try because I brought that up as a word today. Okay, the word that I'm looking for is actually hemoglobin. So basically, they have no nucleus. So without nucleus, they are able to now store more oxygen when it's traveling to the lungs. They also have a biconcave shape. By having a biconcave shape, it actually has an increased surface area so that oxygen can move into the red blood cells at a faster rate. And they have an elastic membrane, so they swell up. And the special word that I was looking for, I'm very certain that you probably may not have learned it yet, but it's good for impressing people. Red blood cells contain this thing called hemoglobin. So it's because red blood cells contain hemoglobin, that's why red blood cells are the only cells in the entire human body that can react and bind to oxygen, because the hemoglobin binds with oxygen. All right, then we move on. The last part of the circulatory system that we're going to be looking at will be the blood vessels themselves. So the blood vessels are like your railway tracks, and they form a network of tubes connected to the heart so that blood can be distributed throughout every part of your body. And I mean every part. Okay, so some blood vessels have valves in them, and these valves basically ensure that blood flows in a one direction. Okay, so for example, if this is my blood vessels, I have blood flowing in this direction. These are what valves are. These valves will open and blood can flow because there's a gap here. But if these are my blood vessels and blood attempts to flow backwards, what happens is that my valves will actually end up closing. Because of the force, these flaps will flap upwards. You understand? So these valves actually prevent the flow of blood in the wrong direction. So valves are basically these things. These flaps are valves. They ensure that blood always flows in the correct direction. So when blood is moving from up to down, then the valves will open. When blood tries to flow from down to up, the valves will close and blood cannot flow in the wrong direction. Okay, so which type of blood vessels have valves? Primarily the veins. Not all blood vessels will have valves, but veins have valves because the blood that's flowing in the veins is slow. Okay, there are three types of blood vessels. We have the arteries. These are directly connected to the heart, so they are large and they have thick muscular walls. We have veins. These are the second type. They are large as well, but they have thinner muscular walls. And the last ones are the capillaries, and they are very small and they are thin walls. So why do we have three types? Okay, the arteries basically transports blood. Oh, let's see. Okay, the artery transports blood away from the heart. The veins transports blood towards the heart. And lastly, the capillaries, they don't transport blood to or from the heart, but basically they are blood vessels that allow exchange of materials within the body organs. So these are the functions of the different blood vessels. I'm now going to show you a quick video for us to understand how blood moves in.
Your heart is a pump. It's a muscular organ about the size of your fist and is located slightly left of center in your chest. Your heart is divided into the right and left side. The division protects oxygen-rich blood from mixing with oxygen-poor blood. Together, your heart and blood vessels comprise your cardiovascular system, which circulates blood and oxygen around your body. In fact, your heart pumps about 5 quarts of blood every minute, and it beats about 100,000 times in one day. That's about 35 million times in a year. Oxygen-poor blood, blue blood, returns to the heart after circulating through your body. The right side of the heart, composed of the right atrium and ventricle, collects and pumps the blood to the lungs through the pulmonary arteries. The lungs refresh the blood with a new supply of oxygen, making it turn red. Oxygen-rich blood, red blood, then enters the left side of the heart, composed of the left atrium and ventricle, and is pumped through the aorta to the body to supply tissues with oxygen. 4 valves within your heart keep your blood moving the right way. The tricuspid, mitral, pulmonary, and aortic valves work like gates on a fence. They open only one way and only when pushed on. Each valve opens and closes once per heartbeat, or about once every second. A beating heart contracts and relaxes. Contraction is called systole, and relaxing is called diastole. During systole, your ventricles contract, forcing blood into the vessels going to your lungs and body, much like ketchup being forced out of a squeeze bottle. The right ventricle contracts a little bit before the left ventricle does. Your ventricles then relax during diastole and are filled with blood coming from the upper chambers, the left and right atria. Then the cycle starts over again. Your heart is nourished by blood too. Blood vessels called coronary arteries extend over the surface of your heart and branch into smaller capillaries. Here you can see just the network of blood vessels that feed your heart with oxygen-rich blood. Your heart also has electrical wiring, which keeps it beating. Electrical impulses begin high in the right atrium and travel through specialized pathways to the ventricles, delivering the signal to pump. The conduction system keeps your heart beating in a coordinated and normal rhythm, which in turn keeps blood circulating. The continuous exchange of oxygen-rich blood with oxygen-poor blood is what keeps you alive.
Okay, so that's a summary. I know there were very, very big terms that were introduced. I assure you, you do not need to know about the systole, about diastole. Interesting question. Why is it that when we cut ourselves, it's red blood instead of blue? It really depends very often on which blood vessels that you cut. Very often when we cut, the blood vessels that are cut or severed are usually our capillaries. Our capillaries are able to actually, I remember, they basically have exchange of materials. That means they have oxygen-rich blood as well. So this oxygen-rich blood is the one that looks red. And even when you have oxygen-poor blood, you don't have it purplish. It just becomes like darker red. So it seems as if it is purplish or bluish on diagrams, but it is not exactly really purplish. Okay, so oxygen-rich blood is bright red, but oxygen-poor blood is not exactly purplish, it's darker or purplish red, but it's still kind of red. Hope that helps. Okay, so let's do a simple experiment in a bit, okay, to understand heart rate. Heart rate is basically the number of heart beats per minute. So every time your heart beats, is basically comprising of one contraction and one relaxation of your heart muscles. So just now, based on the video, you recognize that there are certain valves that are present in your heart. So whenever you have the boom, 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 boom sound that you can feel, is because of the valves in your heart opening and closing. Otherwise, you won't have the boom, 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 boom kind of sound. All right. So this heartbeat is not because of the heart boom, boom, boom sound is not because of the contraction and relaxation. The heart boom, 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 boom sound is actually due to the valves opening and closing in the heart. Okay. So you can actually artificially count your heartbeat by feeling the movement of blood in certain areas. So what I want you to do is to use 2 fingers and put it on your wrist and try to detect a very, very small movement called the pulse. If you cannot feel it, the other place that you can detect a pulse is at your neck, just under the right side of your chin or the left side of your chin. Okay, so find a place where you can identify your pulse. And what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to start timing for 1 minute, and I would like you all to count how many times your heart has beat. Okay, let's stop. That's 30 seconds. I need you to multiply the number by 2. Okay, so can you share with me what your heartbeat was in that 30 seconds, but multiply that number by 2, then you get your heartbeat per minute. I've already opened up. What? Nana, 200 times per minute? Okay, 50 plus is normal, 52 is normal, 60, 70 is normal. Nana, 200 times. 900 times. Okay, usually the smaller the animal, the faster the heartbeat. So maybe you all have very, very small bodies. Elephants will have reduced heart rates. Okay, so basically, this is the average number of heartbeats per minute based on your age. So you are about 9 to 11 years old, so your heart rate should fall between 60 to 110. All right, so if you have a heartbeat of 200 or 1 million, it's not a little, it is way off. And on top of that, of course, there are differing heartbeats even by age, right? So other factors like your health, whatever activity you're doing, your fitness will affect your heart rate. So basically, the fitter you are, the slower your heart rate. But you see, If you are resting, you should have a reduced heart rate. Only when you're exercising, when your muscles need more oxygen, then your heart rate will increase. But if you're resting, you're sleeping, even if you're very fit, or you should not expect to have an elevated heart rate. Okay? Don't worry. It's okay. We can